The Fear may have been the second to last Twilight Zone episode to air, but it was the final original series installment written by creator Rod Serling. Having penned many classics over the show's 5-year run, how did Rod finish out? A state patrol trooper named Robert Franklin arrives at a cabin up in the mountains to investigate reported sightings of unidentified bright lights flashing in the sky. The resident of the cabin is Charlotte Scott, a former fashion editor from New York City. She had a nervous breakdown and decided to move up in the mountains to be alone. Soon, the bright lights and loud noises are experienced by Franklin firsthand. He goes outside to discover large broken tree branches and his police vehicle rolling on its own, flipping over. When he tries to use Scott's phone to call for backup, he finds the line dead. More strange occurrences transpire, including peculiar noises on the roof and giant fingerprints showing up on Franklin's car. Hoping to solve the mystery and protect Charlotte, the trooper decides to spend the night. The next morning, these events get even weirder. Ted Post directed his last of 4 zones. A World of Difference and Mr. Garrity and the Graves are clearly 1 and 2, with this and Probe 7 Over and Out bringing up the rear. I'll give Post credit for some innovative shots and visualizing the material as best he could, but when the script doesn't land, common knowledge dictates it's just difficult to make a good episode. Rod Serling wrote 92 of Twilight Zone's 156 shows. It's a staggering amount of output when you take a step back. Let's make no mistake here, Serling was a great writer. Almost everyone says the same glowing things about the guy's work. If you've seen his best stuff, you'll likely witness the obvious talent he had. But the man himself admitted later that by this point in the series, he was beyond burnt out. He said his perspective was shot. In praise of Pip, The Long Morrow, The Masks, and even I Am the Night, Color Me Black proved that Serling could still strike gold after all this time. But anyone under that kind of pressure putting out that much content was bound to see diminishing quality after a while. The Fear illustrates the absence of some basic writing principles. His characters got to the point where they lost any individuality. We know Serling had a particular way of writing dialogue, but these two speak so much like Rod that it sounds like the narrator is talking to himself.
That elusive thing called culture is really only an inheritable legacy, available only to insufferable snobs, of which, Miss Scott, I'm afraid you are a charter member.
I'm a charter member, but not of snobs. I'm the founder and the chairman of the board of a society of frightened people.
They frequently describe what just happened on screen and repeat it.
It's a footprint.
Yeah, that's what it is, all right. It's a footprint. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. That's Shakespeare, Miss Scott.
But the biggest sin the Fear commits is a total lack of tension. The trooper and the fashion editor interact with a forced antagonism early on, but it gets worse when we start repeating beats without much suspense. And this script is based around suspense. The emotion of fear, how it can control us, how it can fuel us. The idea is fun to see Serling explore, but Charlotte and Robert speak with no subtext. It's all surface-level philosophy, and even in some of Rod's subpar teleplays, this usually wasn't an issue. Instead, we get a pretty bland story with boring characters who have nothing important to say.
I've got to fight that with this. That's like trying to bring down a bomber with a pea shooter.
Ted Post made the most out of the big turns in the story, but outside of that, there's not much that even warrants discussion. Peter Mark Richmond and Hazel Court do their best with the script. I can't say they're awful because I don't think anyone could get away with believably saying some of this stuff. They're the only two on screen to carry the episode, but I don't think they have very good chemistry, so even if the dialogue was great, they may have not worked as a duo. The following day, Franklin and Scott are astonished to see a gargantuan footprint in the dirt outside the cabin. The pair discuss the idea of fear. Charlotte wants to hide under a bed, while the trooper has been through 2 wars and wants to push on. Together, they run into an enormous alien spaceman. Franklin fires upon it with his revolver and the figure deflates. It was a giant balloon. Nearby, the trooper sees a miniature flying saucer with 2 small alien space travelers inside. They're reporting back to their great leader, saying they followed protocol but failed to frighten the humans. In a panic, they take off, leaving Earth. Robert and Charlotte look up, wondering what the future holds for aliens and Earthlings.
It's a balloon. Fantastic. But that's what it is. It's a balloon.
I wish this was goofy the entire time. It would have been more fun that way. The giant spaceman balloon and tiny aliens are so ridiculous. I should have had a better time watching, but the story seems so dragged down by a false sense of suspense that every scene feels tedious. Even the stock music is overly repetitive. I will say the shot of the giant footprint is pretty cool, and the other effects with the car and deflated balloon make the fear at least watchable. I love a good Power Ranger-style forced perspective shot as much as the next guy. The sequence of the flying saucer taking off was from Season 4's Death Ship. It may not be original to this episode, but it still looks great. While some of Rod's later teasy concepts weren't the greatest, he had way more hits than misses and is of course responsible for the series in general. His legacy on this show will continue to be tied to greats like Walking Distance, Time Enough at Last, Mirror Image, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, The After Hours, Eye of the Beholder, The Obsolete Man, It's a Good Life, To Serve Man, On Thursday We Leave for Home, and so many more that speak to his skills as a writer and adapter. While I'd rather skip past the fear, it marks the end of Rod's creative involvement in the series, and because of that, holds an important place in the Twilight Zone.
The worst thing there is to fear is fear itself. Tonight's tale of terror and tiny people.